The new GOP, aka Republican proposal for stimulus is out, and folks, let me just say, if you were pissed off before, well, this won't disappoint. You're going to be just as pissed off. But I spent quite a few hours going through the actual text and highlighting everything to make a really convenient one video summary of this bill for you. So let's get right into that topic. I do quickly just want to note, yesterday, obviously, the House of Representatives passed a $25 billion funding and restrictions bill for the post office, which, just so you know, Mitch McConnell, leader of the Senate, has already said this bill is dead on arrival. Mark Meadows believed Democrats passed this bill solely for political reasons to, pressure Trump and bring attention to the post office. So we don't actually expect that post office bill to go anywhere. Instead, we're now going to break down the new Republican skinny bill, which is a hopeful tool that Democrats will open up negotiations with Republicans on. We're hoping to see Democrats negotiate some of our favorite things that are missing in the skinny bill into the skinny bill, so at least we can get something done before Congress spends September negotiating the next budget. That is the next year's budget for the country to avoid another government shutdown. Because that's all we need right now is in the middle of a pandemic and a recession, another government shutdown. Remember, folks, that you could use coupon code Larry. It expires in a few days, so check out the courses linked below on making money from home, investing, and YouTube videos, and of course, stocks as well. All right, here we go. As usual, I made a flowchart to make it really easy for us to go through the skinny bill. It includes provisions like liability protections, unemployment, we'll talk about school funding, and some other aspects of stimulus. Let's just go ahead and jump right into it so we can break it down. Here it is. Now I'm going to go ahead and start with liability protections, and then we'll get into the other sections. I'll keep liability short because, well, it legalese gets kind of dense fast. Okay, here's the gist. Liability protections for businesses, schools, individuals, entities, so on and so forth between December 1, 2019 and October 1, 2024. These two phrases here are very important: gross negligence and willful misconduct. Gross negligence, they define as the reckless disregard for legal duty and standards or guidance. So any kind of rules, reckless disregard. Then we have willful misconduct, is intentionally doing something to achieve a wrongful purpose. There we go. And knowingly, without a legal justification, doing something that has such obvious risk that it has a high probability of causing harm. Those are important definitions, and basically the only way to win a COVID lawsuit is if you can provide, as somebody suing somebody, is if you can provide that a defendant did not make reasonable efforts to comply with government standards that were in effect at the time of the potential exposure, and the defendant had to be grossly negligent or conduct willful misconduct that caused an actual exposure. So you could see you have to have both. Somebody was not making reasonable efforts to, prevent exposures. And you have to have, number two, one of the following up here, which is willful misconduct or gross negligence. So I'll leave that up in case you want to pause and read those. Some loopholes that I'm kind of looking at just really quickly that are built into this. And you can see they're actually pretty tight. Some loopholes here would be things like caused an actual exposure. Like, how do you define that maybe you having COVID and being in a restaurant actually caused somebody to be exposed? That'll be hotly debated. What is defined as an actual exposure? Like, yeah, maybe you were exposed, but was it an actual exposure? Reasonable efforts, like how do you define reasonable? Like, I put on a cloth face mask and that's it? Or maybe I wrapped like a bandana around my mouth. Is that reasonable, right? That's all gonna be debated. Here's a big one. Applicable standards at the time of potential exposure. So this goes back and says like, hey, well, we didn't have any, applicable standards in place in March and you got sick, but sorry, there were no standards saying you had to wear masks. Big loopholes in here. I mean, it's going to be really hard to sue somebody for COVID liability if this passes. Now, obviously, this bill is just a proposal, but I mean, big loopholes here for attorneys to just eat up. Then you also have the or loopholes, which require reckless disregard of standards or intentional and obvious risk and being highly probable of causing harm. Like anything that I bolded here, in my opinion, these are very stringent, verbatim that are going to have to be overcome. And then damages, you know, apparently it looks like you're not going to be able to just sue somebody for like $10 million for you know, getting COVID or something like that, because you're going to have to actually prove economic loss. So that would be like, hey, I wasn't able to work for 2 months. I lost $8,000 because of that. And you made me have pain and suffering. Like, I want you to be punished. Well, punitive damages are limited at no more than compensatory damages, which basically, if you get $8,000 because of economic loss, punitive damages can be no more than another $8,000. Just as an example there. So you know, because they're compensating you for an economic loss, right? Really, I mean, this is like a very, very tough lawsuit to win. And honestly, you know, if this is all you can get for punitive and economic, a lot of people probably just won't even file the lawsuits, because you have to literally prove substantial economic damages to actually get something out of this lawsuit, above and beyond attorney fees. Big, 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 big hole there. Okay, then we've got unemployment. Unemployment boost would be extended by $300 through December 27th. 2020. Basically, they went into the CARES Act verbiage and just redefined it as $600 before July 31st and $300 thereafter. So it would go back to the old system, not this new FEMA executive order system. Then we've got the second round of PPP loans. We've got a bunch of new inclusions. The second round would end December 31st. It would include property damage, including looting provisions. Any kind of essential supplies it would now include, worker protections like installing drive-through windows, so even doing upgrades would now be considered part of the PPP loan program. That would be forgivable, that forgivable money. Barriers, screening, respirators, PPE, social distancing, you know, tools or requirements or whatever, I don't know, posters, whatever. Doesn't include real estate. Darn, can't go shopping for real estate with a forgivable loan. Loans under, this is interesting, a big change here. Loans under $150,000. Folks, if you are self-employed, or you are an independent contractor, or you've got a small business with 300 or fewer employees, listen to this, okay? $150,000 loans or less, banks are required to base your loan off a self-attestation, and the lender is to rely on that attestation. Now, if you have a loan of under $150,000, this is actually incorrect. I copy and pasted that wrong, my bad. You only have to keep your documentation for 1 year. And the only way your funds would not get forgiven is if there was fraud, like if they audited you and there was fraud. So you are subject to an audit, but to get up to $150,000 as even like a self-employed single person, all you have to do is attest that you need the money for, you know, covered purposes like payroll expenses or some of the other original purposes. And the only way that breaks is if you were proven to have a fraudulent application through an audit, which honestly, I wonder how many of these loans they'll actually audit. But I mean, don't lie, but it just goes to show they're trying to give people money is what they're doing here. The loans between $150,000 and $2 million, those are gonna have the 3-year document retention. Also go based off an attestation. Just really loose guidelines here. They're making it really easy to take advantage of this money. Eligibility, again, I kind of mentioned this with the 300 up to 300 employees. Again, even if you're self-employed, you got a side hustle, you could apply for this. If this passes, you know, then we'll know more. Recipients, in order to qualify money-wise, you have to have made or be making 35% less money in 2020 than you made in 2019. Now, what's actually really interesting about this is they allow it to be the first or second quarter. So if between January, Feb, and March, or April, May, and June, if in either of those quarters you made 35% less money in 2020 than you did in 2019, you'd qualify. And they're gonna have some sort of streamlined forgiveness as well. Fascinating. Then we've got $105 billion for schools. 5% gets assigned to governors for them to sort of grant out and be responsible for dealing with. 67% goes to elementary and secondary schools. They'll get 1/3 immediately, but they'll only get the remaining 2/3 if students actually go to school, and there is a solid reopening plan for 2020 to 2021. This is clearly Republicans saying here, we demand that if schools want the majority of the funding, they must be open. And obviously, some of those funds could be spent on technology, computers, healthcare, sanitation planning, so on and so forth. 28% of that school funding is going to go to higher education, and then they've got some specific requirements as to how that gets divided out. Honestly, that section was really boring. Basically, 28% goes to higher education. Postal Service, $10 billion, which is $15 billion less than what Democrats just passed in their Delivering for America Act, which, by the way, this is called the Delivering Immediate Relief to America's Families, Schools, and Small Businesses Act. So I feel like it's almost a little bit of a play on the Delivering for America's Act. Although, honestly, I don't know that we've seen very much immediate relief for America's families here yet. I mean, we've got PPP funding. We've got, unemployment protection, so the $300 a week. Well, that's a nice boost. I mean, it's half of what it was, so it's still a slap in the face, but at least it would streamline the process and we wouldn't be sitting around waiting for FEMA. Liability protections, but otherwise, I don't see families getting immediate relief here. I don't see any money going to, no stimulus checks, no money for people who are retired, no money for heroes. Heroes have just been screwed throughout this pandemic, honestly. Okay, so some forgivable loan provisions for the post office, fine. Healthcare would get $29 billion to the Public Health and Social Services Emergency Fund and $16 billion for COVID-19 testing, vaccines, countermeasures, telehealth, infrastructure, whatever. But yeah, look at this. No state and local aid, no stimulus checks, no heroes funding, nothing. Nothing in terms of actual immediate relief for American families. So I'm honestly, I'm kind of missing the boat on that. And Congress and immediate is like an oxymoron. But yeah, I would say that hopefully this bill gets picked up by the Senate. Hopefully they come in earlier after the RNC is the expectation. If they come in after the RNC, like the week of August 31st to the 4th of September, then it's quite possible that senators could pass this skinny bill. Democrats in the House of Representatives are expected to counter this skinny bill. I would presume that Democrats would counter on the amount of the unemployment, maybe try to boost that to $400 to $500 and scale it with the rate of unemployment in the country. Try to include some stimulus checks, which are popular with Trump and many Republicans. So stimulus checks and unemployment are things that I expect to see counteroffers on. There's no money in here for supplemental nutrition like food stamps. Nothing in here for rental assistance. So people who are behind on rent and are facing eviction, nothing. Eviction wasn't even mentioned in this bill. Just to kind of show you, it's a 116-page bill. This is the bill. It's quite a bit of work to go through all of these different sections because the way they wrote it, things are very, very spread out in the way they actually defined some of the sections in here. But I'll go ahead and link this 116-page bill down below as well, just so you have it. But if I do a quick find on this, command find, let me type in eviction here. I literally get 0 matches for eviction. If I type in stimulus, I get 0 matches for stimulus. So, yeah, it kind of gives you a little bit of an idea of where the priorities are and where they lay for our lawmakers, which, in my opinion, is quite disappointing. So, well, there you have the breakdown, the complete breakdown of the skinny bill. If you like this kind of content, consider subscribing. Remember, you can use that coupon code to get those awesome courses below. Get 2 free stocks with Webull. You deposit $100. This company literally gives you 2 free stocks. If you want life insurance, you can get it in as little as 5 minutes via the links down below. Really good life insurance. It's what I have. There you have it, folks. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time.